Sir, I can fix this machine.
Do you have any idea what you're saying? What kind of nonsense is this? This boy is gonna fix the machine now? The greatest scientist couldn't even do it.
Now I'll show you what I'm made of, and I will fix this machine.
It was 3 a.m. The NeuroCore Energy wasn't just an office. It was the birthplace of the Helios Project, a $10 billion attempt to create the world's first stable fusion reactor. It was supposed to be the invention that saved humanity from climate change, providing endless clean energy. But for the last 30 days, it had been a ticking time bomb of failure. The launch was scheduled for 48 hours from now. Inside the lab, the simulation had failed for the 100th time. The reactor couldn't hold the plasma stable for more than 3 seconds before overheating. If they turned it on during the launch, it wouldn't just fail. It would explode, taking half the city block with it. In the center of this chaos stood Marcus Thorne. He was a legend in Silicon Valley, a man who had built electric cars and rockets, but tonight he looked defeated. His tie was loosened, his eyes were red from lack of sleep, and he was staring at a whiteboard covered in complex equations that the smartest PhDs from MIT and Caltech couldn't solve. He slammed his hand against the desk, the sound echoing through the silent lab. He yelled at his team that they were missing something obvious, that they were looking at the problem like mathematicians instead of visionaries. But the room remained silent. No one had an answer. Frustrated, Marcus stormed out of the lab to get some air, leaving his team of exhausted engineers to stare blankly at their screens. While the billionaires and geniuses were losing hope, a 19-year-old boy named Caleb was pushing a gray trash cart down the hallway. Caleb didn't exist in their world. To the scientists, he was just normal boy, a blurry figure in a blue uniform who emptied the bins and mopped the floors. They didn't know that Caleb had an IQ that would make their heads spin. Caleb stopped outside the glass doors of the main lab. He watched the engineers arguing, pointing at the simulation of the magnetic field collapsing. He gripped the handle of his mop tightly. He wanted to scream the answer. He wanted to walk in there and tell them that their calculation for the thermal expansion was off by a fraction of a decimal because they weren't accounting for the quantum interference of the containment alloy. But he knew what would happen if he did. He was just the janitor. He was the kid who couldn't afford college because his mother, Elena, was dying of a rare autoimmune disease. Every dollar he made went to her treatment. If he caused a scene, he would be fired, and without this job, his mother's medication would stop. He couldn't risk it. He lowered his head and continued mopping, the smell of lemon cleaner mixing with the metallic scent of the high-tech lab. But as the night went on, the desperation in the room grew. The engineers finally gave up around 4:30 a.m., deciding to get a few hours of sleep before the final diagnostic. One by one, the lights in the offices flickered off, leaving the main lab illuminated only by the soft blue glow of the reactor core and the emergency exit lights. The hum of the servers was the only sound left. Caleb finished cleaning the second-floor bathrooms and found himself standing in front of the open door to the main control room. It was empty. The giant whiteboard, covered in the failed equations, stood there like a monument to their arrogance. Caleb walked in. He knew he shouldn't. The security cameras were everywhere, but he also knew the guard, old Joe, was likely asleep at the desk in the lobby. Caleb walked up to the whiteboard. He picked up a black marker. His hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the overwhelming urge to fix the broken logic staring at him. He started writing. He didn't erase their work, he corrected it. He drew a line through the magnetic field variable and wrote a new formula next to it, one that incorporated non-linear fluid dynamics. He worked fast, his mind racing faster than his hand could move. For him, numbers weren't just math. They were music. They had a rhythm, and the rhythm on this board was offbeat. He was fixing the melody. He spent 20 minutes filling the empty space on the board with a solution that was elegant, simple, and revolutionary. When he was done, he stepped back. It was perfect. The equation balanced. The plasma would hold. He capped the marker, wiped his fingerprints off it with his shirt, and placed it back on the tray. He felt a rush of adrenaline, a feeling of power he had never experienced before. For a moment, he wasn't Caleb the janitor. He was Caleb the architect of the future. He turned to leave, grabbing his trash cart, ready to disappear back into the shadows before the morning shift arrived. But he had stayed too long. As he turned toward the door, the overhead lights suddenly blazed to full brightness. An alarm chirped once, sharp and loud. Caleb froze. Standing in the doorway wasn't a security guard. It was Marcus Thorne. The CEO had come back early, unable to sleep. Marcus stood there, stunned, looking from the whiteboard to the boy in the janitor's uniform holding a trash bag. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Marcus walked slowly toward the board, his eyes scanning the new equations. He read them once, then he read them again. His expression changed from anger to confusion, and then to pure shock. He looked at the final variable Caleb had written. It was the missing key. Marcus turned slowly to look at Caleb. He didn't look like a savior. He looked like a terrified kid who was about to run. Marcus took a step forward and asked in a low, dangerous voice who Caleb was and what he had done to the board. Caleb's heart hammered against his ribs. He stammered that he was sorry, that he was just cleaning, and that he would wipe it off immediately. He reached for the eraser, terrified that he had just ruined his life. But before his hand could touch the board, Marcus grabbed his wrist. The grip was firm. Marcus looked him dead in the eye and said that if he erased a single number, he would be the one going to jail. He asked again with more intensity who Caleb was and how he knew that equation. Caleb swallowed hard, realizing there was no way out. He was trapped, and the most powerful man in the world was holding his arm, waiting for an answer that Caleb was too scared to give. The interrogation room wasn't a police station. It was Marcus Thorne's private glass-walled office overlooking the city skyline. Caleb sat on a leather chair that cost more than his mother's entire year of medical bills. He was still wearing his janitor's uniform, his hands shaking in his lap. Across from him, Marcus Thorne was pacing back and forth, holding a tablet. The room was silent except for the sound of Marcus's footsteps. Marcus finally stopped pacing and looked at Caleb. He told the boy that the engineering team had just run the simulation using the variables Caleb had written on the board. He paused, letting the weight of the moment hang in the air. Caleb braced himself for the screaming, for the lawsuit, for the firing. But Marcus said quietly that it worked. The simulation didn't just hold, it was 300% more efficient than their best model. The reactor was stable. Marcus leaned against his desk, crossing his arms. He looked at Caleb not with anger, but with a burning curiosity that was almost unsettling. He asked Caleb where he had studied. MIT, Stanford, Cambridge? Caleb shook his head, looking down at his worn-out sneakers. He whispered that he had never been to college. He said he finished high school online while working 2 jobs. Marcus narrowed his eyes, unable to believe what he was hearing. He asked how a kid with a high school diploma solved a quantum physics problem that stumped the greatest minds in the country. Caleb looked up, his voice finding a little bit of strength. He explained that he read everything. He told Marcus that the engineers were looking at the energy as a particle, but it behaved like a wave. He explained the math as if he were talking about the weather, simple and obvious. As he spoke, Marcus saw something familiar in the boy's eyes, a spark of obsession, a frantic kind of genius that Marcus hadn't seen in anyone but himself 20 years ago. Marcus sat down, his voice softening. He asked Caleb about his family. He asked why someone with this mind was mopping floors at 3 in the morning. Caleb hesitated. This was the part he hated. He didn't want pity, but he answered honestly. He told Marcus about his mother, Elena. He explained that she used to be a researcher too, a long time ago before she got sick, before the bills piled up and crushed them. He said she was the one who taught him calculus when he was 6 years old. She was the one who told him that the universe was written in the language of mathematics. At the mention of the name Elena, Marcus froze. The color drained from his face. He asked Caleb to repeat the name. Caleb said it again. Elena Vance. The air left the room for Marcus. He stood up abruptly, knocking his chair over. His hands were trembling as he walked to the window, turning his back to Caleb. His mind flashed back 20 years. New York City, a small apartment in Brooklyn. A young woman named Elena who was brilliant, fiery, and full of dreams. They were partners, in life and in work. But Marcus was ambitious, ruthless. He wanted to move to California to chase the venture capital money. Elena wanted to stay, to work on ethical science. They fought. It was a bad fight. Marcus left the next morning, leaving a note and a check, and never looked back. He thought he was choosing his future. He didn't know he was leaving it behind. He turned back to Caleb, looking at the boy's face properly for the first time. The shape of the jaw, the way he held his hands when he was nervous. The eyes, they were Elena's eyes, but the fire behind them was Marcus's. Marcus walked over to Caleb, his corporate mask completely gone. He asked, his voice breaking, if Elena ever talked about Caleb's father. Caleb shook his head. He said his mom never talked about him. She only said that he was a man who loved his work more than he loved people, and that he was gone. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. It was the truth. He had built an empire. He had billions of dollars. He had fame, but he had been alone for 20 years. And now, sitting in front of him, cleaning his floors, was the son he never knew he had. The son who had inherited his gift. Marcus didn't say it immediately. He couldn't. It was too much. Instead, he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a security badge, a platinum one, the kind only executives wore. He slid it across the table to Caleb. He told Caleb that his days of cleaning floors were over. He said that the Helios project needed a lead analyst, and the position was just filled. Caleb looked at the badge, confused, asking if this was a joke. Marcus shook his head. He said it was the beginning. He told Caleb to go home, get his mother, and bring her to the best hospital in the city, and that the company, no, he, would cover everything, every cent. The launch of the Helios reactor 2 days later was flawless. The world cheered as the first clean energy grid went online, changing history forever. But the cameras missed the most important moment. They missed the moment in the VIP box, where Marcus Thorne stood not with the president, but next to a frail woman in a wheelchair and a young man in a suit that didn't quite fit him yet. Marcus held Elena's hand, tears streaming down his face as he whispered an apology 20 years in the making. Marcus looked at Caleb and realized that this machine wasn't his greatest creation. The boy standing next to him was. The world saw a billionaire and his new protege. But in that room, it was just a father, a mother, and a son, finally piecing together the only equation that truly mattered. Caleb looked at the burning light of the reactor and smiled. He finally understood that sometimes you have to be invisible before the world can truly see you shine.